Welcome into the Action Network podcast presented by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Brendan Glasheen joined by two NFL contributors at Action Network, Jill Gallant, Brandon Anderson. Great to have the crew back together. This is our annual NFL Awards Best Bets episode where our experts highlight their favorite pick across MVP, Coach of the Year, Rookies of the Year, Offensive, Defensive, etc. And as a reminder, we're taking a real deep dive into NFL right now. The season is vastly approaching here on the Action Network podcast. This week, we have a full lineup of episodes, including season-long player props, exotics, NFL pool play, and that will be everything we have as far as season outlook stuff before we dive into the normal season schedule, like best bets, etc., for NFL Week 1. Very exciting times, and great to talk to both of you again. It's been a while, so excited to have this pod. Let's just dive right in. We're going to start with MVP because it's always the juicy conversation heading into the year, and everyone freaks out by week 4, week 5, who the favorite should be. But for our interest, we have a show to do today, and we have to talk about what the lines look like right now, Brandon Anderson. So and this is how we're going to do this podcast, everybody. We'll go to Brandon first for each award, and he's going to give the historical background, historical context on how this award typically shakes out, the criteria of the player, and how it typically unfolds season by season. So, Brandon, why don't you get us started and set the scene for MVP of the National Football League?
Let's do this. I am glad to be back. Good to see you all. It's been a minute. Get my pizza ready. We're back at it again. MVP is a quarterback award. We know this. We don't have to go over it, but 15 out of 16 MVPs have been quarterbacks. Truly, I did not even look at another name for MVP. It's quarterbacks only. Cooper Kupp is the only non-quarterback to even get a vote in the last 5 years. He got one first place vote. No one else any first place votes. So it's a quarterback. 12 of the last 16 MVPs went to Brady, Peyton, Rodgers, Mahomes. That's it. Those 4 dudes. So Mahomes is the favorite. We'll get to him in a second. He's the right favorite. This is a team award, not just a player award. Those 15 quarterbacks won 83% of their games. That is a 14.1 win pace. 14 wins. That is a 1 seed most of the time, is a top 2 seed all but 1 out of the 15, and 13 or more wins for 11 out of the 15. So we got to win a lot of games. You need your quarterback to put up stats. Typically, the average here is about 4,500 yards, 40 touchdowns. That is close to 300 yards a game, 2.5 scores a game. That all basically means that MVP, for as fun as it's going to be, and we're going to talk about it all year, we really have like 10 or 12 guys here. Like there is not a lot of names to the conversation. There are only quarterbacks, and a lot of them are already disqualified because their team's not good enough. So a couple other notes here. Average age, higher than you think. 31 years old over this stretch. Why? Well, because Brady and Manning and Rodgers keep winning it, right? So if you take those 3 out, the average age is 26. So now it's back more where you're looking at your Herberts, your Lawrences, the guys we'll get to. As far as odds, a couple things here to note. 6 of the last 8 winners started plus 1,100 or longer. So it's not usually the favorite here. However, if it is the favorite, it's usually because it's Brady, Rodgers, Mahomes, or Peyton, because they're the favorite. That's how this thing goes. So that's that one. Last thing, this is not helpful right now, but in season, we love our VORPs and Schwarps, right? Our advanced stats. EPA, if you look at EPA in season, 14 out of our 15 winners finished top 2 in EPA per play, and 14 out of 15 finished top 2 in EPA plus completion over expectation. So as the season goes along, those can be very good indicators to tell us who's not really in the running and who might surprise and be in the running. So lots to go on for MVP here. Obviously, Mahomes is our defending guy here. We got him on the podcast last year. That was our first big win, I think plus 800 or 900, depending on the book you got him. You got to start with him. It's a fun field. Maybe not quite as big a field as we would like to believe.
Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, those were some of the names in that grouping with Mahomes as far as looking at the odds last year at this point in the preseason. And I think your note about the age when you eliminate Rodgers, Brady, and Manning, 26 is that kind of spot where they're probably out of their rookie deal. They got a big fat extension. So that's interesting too, how that timing kind of lines up. With all that being said, Jill Gallant, why don't you give us a pick and who do you like for MVP based on all that context and how it shakes out?
Sure. And one of the things I would also add is some of those winners were in the first few years rather of their deal. If you look at Patrick Mahomes, you look at
True.
Lamar Jackson, both second-year starters. So I'm going to be looking at somebody who I think is going to make a natural progression here. And I'm taking a look at Trevor Lawrence for MVP at 16-1. Now, right now at FanDuel, that's where he is at plus 1600. There's others at 16-1. You've got Lamar Jackson, you've got Dak Prescott, Aaron Rodgers, Tua Tagovailoa. Of all of those of the group, to me, Lawrence, I feel, has the best shot. And when you start to look at some of the other correlating odds, for example, the AFC South, they're favored to win the AFC South right now around minus 155. That's about a 60% implied probability. So winning that division, I think there's potential for best record in the AFC. Now, Brandon did mention in his profile for MVP that winning record is a consistent theme because every MVP winner over the last 8 years has been on a team that has had or shared the best conference record. And then once you look at the division that they're in, it's a mess. Like the Colts are starting over at quarterback. Their best player doesn't want to play there anymore. The Titans roster has regressed, in my opinion, despite adding receiver to Andre Hopkins. And we'll talk about the Texans here in a little bit, but I think the Texans, even though they were able to get their quarterback of the future and maybe potentially the best defensive player in the draft, I still think they're building up from the basement, so they're probably a little bit overmatched. So the Jags are going to get some easy wins this year. They went 4-2 in the division in 2022. Every other team in the division has got glaring weaknesses, so I think there's potential to go at least 5-1 or 6-0 in the division. But then you look at the coaching aspect in Trevor Lawrence. The Doug Peterson influence, I don't think we could just overlook that because he's got a bit of a track record as a quarterback whisperer. Like he can really coach them up. I mean, stat-wise for Lawrence, I mean, it was a nightmare in year one with Urban Meyer. Year two, night and day. He's 9th in passing yards, 8th in touchdown passes. And most importantly, guys, he cut down on those dumb-ass turnovers. He led the NFL with 17 picks in the first year, got that down to 8 in year two, gets a nice wide receiver one in Calvin Ridley to help spread the field, even more of a downfield threat, maybe helping with that EPA. Now, they do have some tough teams on the docket. They've got the Chiefs, they've got the Bills, they've got the Niners, and the Bengals on tap. Some would argue that that would obviously a big threat to Lawrence's MVP campaign. I see it as opportunity because if the Jags and Lawrence play well, it's going to go a long way when we get to the end of the year and voters are starting to make that MVP case at the end of the season, looking at who they beat, who they played. And if he plays well in those games, we're going to be talking about Lawrence at the end of the year. And I think there's a lot of potential for them to get to a top seed in the AFC conference. So Trevor Lawrence at 16-1 is my best bet for NFL MVP.
I don't think it can be overstated the continuity at coach and quarterback in that division. Now, I know Ryan Tannehill is back with Mike Vrabel, so technically they've been together before, but they drafted Will Levis. They still have Malik Willis. It's a mess. They have 3 quarterbacks that they might use this year at some point. So I think that's a great point, too, that the continuity and in that division just stinking is beneficial. And opportunity, as you said, a first-place schedule because they won the division. Brandon, with your context in mind, who's a guy who jumps out?
So I'm going to talk about 2 guys here because to kind of talk through my process. For me, given the criteria I spoke with, Patrick Mahomes has to be where you start here. Like, it's boring because he's so obviously checks every single box down the list. He's the best player on the best team. He has the best coaches. He's on the best offense. Here's the list. He's played 5 years, 12 or more wins every year. Top 3 EPA every year. Top 2 DVOA offense every year. It's that obvious and that boring. There are some red flags. He's going to have 2 new starting tackles. Usually that takes a little time to start the year. Travis Kelce turns 34 this year. No Eric Bieniemy calling plays or at least helping the scheme. We'll see if that actually helps or hurts them. No Chris Jones maybe on defense. Again, team award. You got to win games. Defense helps you win games. So I think if you just want to make one bet right now for MVP and I'm out and I'll ride this ticket to the end, I think Mahomes is the guy. 600 is too long, even for a player this time of the year. I don't think you should be more than half of that as the clear favorite. We saw Rodgers, Peyton, Brady, Mahomes. These are the guys that win the award. To me, if I'm building a position, I have to have Mahomes in the portfolio somewhere along the way. I will build a position. I'm hoping to wait and probably add him at a better number later. This is going to be the conversation all year. It's going to move. Guys like Josh Allen have an awesome opening schedule. I think Allen's probably the leader at the midpoint of the season if he's healthy, but I don't like him late. But that sort of movement means I can maybe add Mahomes later at a spot where his number dropped because now it's Allen's year or it's Herbert's year or maybe it's Trevor Lawrence's year. So the other reason that I'm a little hesitant to go in Mahomes, we know this. Where are all the good teams this year? It's the AFC. I did my quarterback rankings article. 8 of the top 9 quarterbacks in my article all play in the AFC. It's absurd. Everything is in the AFC. I want someone in the NFC because it's way easier to win 12 games and be a top 2 seed. In fact, that's basically where I'm going. I'm going with the guy that was just outside my top 9 quarterbacks at number 10. And I'm going to give you a pick that'll make Jill happy. My guy, Dak Prescott, Dallas Cowboys, 25-1. The case is effectively what I just said. Dak Prescott has a good chance, in my opinion, to be on the NFC 1 seed. I don't really like the Niners that much this year for a number of reasons. The NFC is wide open. That basically means I'm down to Eagles and Cowboys. And if the Eagles don't beat the Cowboys in the division, Dallas is probably the 1 seed. So now, what do I have? Quarterback on the 1 seed of America's team. That's the soundbite. That's the MVP right there. The NFC is open. Look, I know, Mike McCarthy, I'm not excited. I would rather not have Mike McCarthy involved in a bet I'm making, but he tends to skew pass heavy. So I think that can only help Dak. He passes more. I like Brandon Cooks there this year, helping with CeeDee Lamb. I do not like Brian Schottenheimer either. However, he does have a good history of getting the ball to receivers on the move. I think that's a very good fit for Lamb and Cooks. I don't want McCarthy or Schottenheimer holding my money. No, thank you. I do not want it, sir. But I can see a world where this offense kind of sets up just right for a timing quarterback like Dak to get the ball to these guys, let Lamb and cook, I guess, per se. Dak's numbers over his career, 7.6 yards per attempt. That's a good number. 6% touchdown rate the last couple of years. You usually have to spike in TDs here to get into the mix. That's a good number. He's had a top 3 EPA season. He got an MVP vote in his season. To me, I don't know that I would say he's the favorite to win. He certainly is not. That's Mahomes. But I think he's a quarterback of a team that is absolutely in the mix for a 1 seed. And at 25-1, that is the worst number. Or that's a bad number for an NFC 1 seed possibility. So Dak is my top value on the board.
And referencing Brandon Anderson's quarterback rankings, he said 8 of the first 9 in the AFC. Well, his second NFC quarterback is Dak Prescott at number 10 on your list. So,
exactly.
You got him as the second best quarterback in the conference, Joe. That's where he's got Dak Prescott. You got reaction to this? Are you excited or now nervous?
The only counter I would say is you got to get the interceptions down because Mahomes, he did have 11 interceptions last year, but that was actually like an anomaly. Normally we're looking at, 5, 6, 7 interceptions kind of at most. And he only played 12 games last year and he still had the league in interceptions. So I think the main thing that I would just say right now, I'm seeing his over-under interception line around 12.5. I do think that is going to go under, which obviously correlates with Brandon's play. But that is the one thing that I think is the sticking factor for Dak is that right now there's still a lot of, bad blood about how many picks he's been throwing unnecessarily last year.
All right. Good to keep in mind. And that's been a theme of camp and really the lead up here is Dak just keeps throwing interceptions. And he's actually been very kind of outspoken about that. And Trey Lance is there now. So maybe I'm not saying he's a threat, but maybe it gives Dak a little kick, they brought this 3rd overall pick in. Who knows? I like it.
My guy, Trey Lance. Jill, I'm a Cowboys fan now. Welcome me to the bandwagon. Let's go Cowboys.
North Dakota State.
I can't believe the disrespect Cooper Rush is getting right now in this conversation.
This is a great point. So, as Brandon said earlier, this is a really fun award to talk about. So let's spend a couple minutes quickly on some of the longer shot guys, popular names. And Brandon, as we prepared for this pod, I thought it was interesting some of the names you threw out because these quarterbacks, this group that you put together, to me, and one of these guys, I remember you bet last year because there was some legs under this player because of how the team got hot middle of the season. And as we found out, it didn't work out, but it was just fascinating to me. It feels like this next grouping you want to hit on, there are some guys in here that have that mobile aspect. And when you look at your historical context points, only Lamar and Cam Newton, I guess Aaron Rodgers, I think he's still more of a pure pocket guy, but you look at Jackson and Newton as two of the more mobile guys in the last 10 years that have won this award. The guys that you want to talk about as longer shot guys are mobile quarterbacks. Why don't you discuss some of those names?
Yeah, look, Justin Fields is a very popular candidate. If you've been listening to across our Action Network podcast platforms, you hear a lot of Justin Fields love. I know the guys on the favorites really like Justin Fields. I believe Chris Raybon's in on Justin Fields.
Yep.
I got to be honest. I am not in on Justin Fields. I live here in the Chicago area. I watch a lot of Justin Fields. As politely as I can say it, I want a quarterback to win the award. I don't really know if Justin Fields is a quarterback. His passing metrics, his passing numbers are terrible across the board. In my quarterback rankings, I got slander for putting him 20th. I thought I was being pretty kind putting him 20th. I was giving him the benefit of the doubt putting him 20th. He can improve because he's young. And yeah, I know the blocking got a little better and he's got a DJ Moore help at receiver. I get the case. I think the blocking is still way better run blocking than pass blocking. I think DJ Moore can only do so much. We've seen quarterbacks make a huge leap, but everyone wants to say, well, yeah, Josh Allen. Josh Allen's the only example because he's the only example. Like when a quarterback is really bad like this, like the numbers look, usually that means they don't have a job at the end of this year, not that they're the MVP at the end of this year. That is the far more likely outcome to me here. I don't like the Justin Fields love myself, especially I think if you wanted him, you missed the boat. He's 22-1 now or shorter. I think you had to get the long shot while he was out there. You mentioned the guy that I bet on last year, Tua Tagovailoa. Yep. I thought he was maybe going to be my pick here. I wanted to get there. First 8 games last year when he was healthy, he won all 8 games, and he was on pace for 5,200 yards and 40 touchdowns. And he was number 1 in EPA. That's your MVP. That's it. Unfortunately, the other 9 games count. So he got hurt. He's missed 4 games, 2 years in a row. He had injury history at Alabama. He's a small guy. We know about all that stuff. On top of that, the offensive line is not good. Teron Armstead, you're taking on his injury risk as well because Miami suffered when he was out, the left tackle. Tyreek Hill, you're taking on his injury risk as well. So I think the path is there for Tua if everything clicks, but you're asking for a lot of things to click on him. So again, ultimately, he's someone, if he was maybe a 40 or 50, I'd take a shot. I couldn't get there at a 22-1. Russell Wilson, our guy from last year. Jared Goff had the great finish. Deshaun Watson, I actually would have given more thought to, except let's just be real. Nobody's voting for Deshaun Watson this year. Like, the guy could throw 100 touchdowns, and I'm still not sure he would win MVP. So that's not even I just don't want to feel about this bet. I don't want it on my portfolio. Just truly, voters have to vote for the guy. And I don't think, maybe down the line, but I don't think this year we're going to get enough votes there. Jill, what do you think? Our guy Russell Wilson, Denver Broncos, does he have a shot this year?
I'm not sure if I'm ready to ride. I know that I crack on the Broncos a lot. Obviously, I think Sean Payton and his influence is going to make a massive impact comparatively to what we saw with Nathaniel Hackett last year. I honestly, of these lists, the issue with a lot of these long shots is you have to overcome objections, and everyone has such a glaring objection. Like Tua, I'm not sure he's going to play all 17 games. Justin Fields, same thing. Like, and to be honest, what we've seen in preseason, it looks a lot like the same mechanics and throwing issues that he was having even the first 2 years as a quarterback. Deshaun Watson, we don't need to get in the morality side of things. He's not getting any votes. Jared Goff, I mean, the Detroit Lions are pretty much pegged to win the NFC at this stage by a lot of experts. So yeah, maybe he might be worth it. But again, Jared Goff, if you go look at his home and away splits, home, he's great. Away, he is a very below average quarterback. And so for me, honestly, I think once we get past the plus 2000s, it's really tough to justify. And then you're starting to get into skill position players, and we've already established we're not even considering those at this stage. So I think you got to kind of look through the first 10 guys, make your pick, and stick with it.
I agree with you, but I'm going to jump in with one more name here to wrap up. I am a glutton for punishment because technically speaking, I've effectively made this bet twice already and had it look terribly for me. I already have one MVP pick in the app from about February or March at 50-1, and he's now a Dallas Cowboy because I was Trey Lance. Guys, I can't stop myself. Brock Purdy, 50-1. I have to consider him for MVP. Here's the case. Look, I just told you I don't believe in the Niners. Despite that, Brock Purdy in the 6 games he effectively started on pace for 3,700 yards, 37 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. 2 touchdowns every single game, 8-0 in games that he played half the snaps, counting those playoff games. 7.6% touchdown rate. That's really good. That's an MVP number. 8.1 yards per attempt. That's an MVP number. We talked about EPA. If you play for Kyle Shanahan at quarterback, you are going to be good at EPA. Like Jimmy Garoppolo has been top 3 to 5 at EPA when he plays over the years. They break the code. If you are a person playing quarterback for Kyle Shanahan, your numbers are going to look good. The weapons are there. The defense is really good. They have a great chance at the 1 seed. Quarterbacks that win on a 1 seed are in the mix. Kyle Shanahan, when he has Garoppolo or Purdy over his career in the Niners, 43-17, a 12-win pace. So I don't love this team. I don't love Brock Purdy. I don't believe in Brock Purdy. I still think this number is way too long. There's such an obvious narrative. Guys, if the Niners go 14-3 as the 1 seed, and we got Mr. Irrelevant coming off of a broken elbow that couldn't even throw the ball, and now he's the quarterback of this juggernaut team, you're telling me we're not going to talk about him as, well, did we find the next Tom Brady? He's an MVP mix now. Like, it's right there. So I have to consider that 50-1. The case that I would make is this. If I'm building a position, I didn't really talk about Jalen Hurts much. I didn't really expect to be in on Jalen Hurts. He doesn't really fit the profile for me. To me, he's a guy that probably last year was a shot, and then we probably don't get there again. Historically, if you finish top 3 in MVP, you get 1 shot, and then you're never back again for most guys. Jalen Hurts, to me, is probably that. But 1,200 is long. If I play my guy Dak and Jalen Hurts and Purdy, I can play all 3 together at plus 641 effectively. And now what did I get? I got what I think, even if I don't like the Niners and I'm a little low on the Eagles, I got probably the top 2 seed quarterbacks in the NFC. We know a top 2 seed wins this. I just got 2 of the 4 candidates to win MVP at 640-1. So that's the reason that I have to add Purdy to it's an NFC only position in a weak conference. Brendan, you're laughing throughout. I know I can't help myself. Tell me why I'm crazy on Brock Purdy.
No. I think we'll get to Coach of the Year in a second, and we do need to move on, but Kyle Shanahan has the same odds to win Coach of the Year as Brock Purdy does to win MVP right now at FanDuel. So that's interesting. And I do see where you're coming from, especially if Purdy has a good year. It will kind of justify management too, trading Trey Lance in the same year. That kind of that butters things up too. So we'll get to that in Coach of the Year because I think that's interesting. Every point you laid out about Brock Purdy, I feel like you could also check boxes off as positives for Kyle Shanahan. Let's go to Offensive Rookie of the Year, and we'll get Brandon's historical context on this. This should be pretty brief because I think these guys are in alignment on this one. So go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, you're looking for a top pick here. Offensive Rookie of the Year goes to a guy in the first round. 16 of the last 19 Rookies of the Year in offense, first round picks. In fact, 15 out of 19 were top 12 picks. And remember, half of those are defense too. So you need a guy near the top. Last 5 winners, all top 10. So top 12, top 10, we're looking at 3 quarterbacks, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, and then Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs. It's very likely one of those guys, especially because you make a pretty good case for all of them. And then you have to go, you need all of them to not do well, to go outside that mix, really. So typically, about half the time it's a quarterback, 2 of the last 4, 9 of the last 19. So numbers come out about half in there. 4 running backs and 4 receivers, 6 running backs out of those 19 as well. Winning does not matter too much here, actually. We don't need rookies to come in and change the world. We just want them to put up some pretty stats, right? Just come to make us feel good. Can you play in my fantasy team? Terrific. You're the Rookie of the Year. Usually Rookie of the Year on offense is a top 10 fantasy player. So pay attention. Stats matter. That stuff adds up. Running back or receiver, You need about 1,300 scrimmage yards and 10 scores. I mentioned winning 8 out of 13 Rookie of the Years have been sub 500, including last year's Rookie of the Year, Garrett Wilson, as the Jets kind of fell off toward the end. So that's the profile. Favorites don't usually win this one, and it's not typically been a running back award of late. But Jill, me and you don't really care about either one of those things this year because we are aligned on the same guy. I'll let you make the case.
Yeah, we immediately started texting each other right after the draft to see the Rookie of the Year odds. And we're like, this seems a little off, that the fact that right now we're still getting plus 300 on this guy. So we're both aligned on Bijan Robinson. I'll get into this, and I think you'll have a little bit more info to add. But I wanted to cite the O-line rankings that you did on the Action Network, where you had the Falcons offensive line in your top 10. They were 7th because this unit just pounds D-lines into the ground. They were 3rd most rushing yards last year, 3rd most rushing first downs, 4th highest yards per carry. And from a fantasy perspective, our own Sean Kerner, we're projecting just over around 300 carries for Bijan in his rookie season. That equates to about 18 touches per game. So that would put him around 300 or more, which is a lot for any rookie. But when you have Algier and Cordero Patterson to be able to help spell, that could even put them in a position to put 2 running back sets out there. One of the interesting things about the Falcons, too, and Arthur Smith's offense is they were the only team last year to run the ball on more than half of their offensive plays. They still ran the ball even when they were playing from behind, where typically NFL teams, that's usually the opposite. And the last rookie running back that we saw taken this high was Saquon Barkley. He finished as running back 1 in fantasy, 1 offensive rookie of the year. Time before that, Ezekiel Elliott was, he probably should have won over Dak Prescott, but I'm not going to get too upset about that. But Ezekiel Elliott should have won that year. I thought he was the best offensive rookie that season. So, and again, I know you were talking about how playoffs and win totals doesn't necessarily correlate to this, but right now the Falcons are getting a lot of preseason hype. They've got minus odds to make the playoffs. They've got an 8.5 win total in an NFC South division that is horrendous, with the
up to
over
8.5 now. Holy crap!
8.5 with the over at minus 135. So
Jesus.
We're going to probably see them as fairly competitive this year. So Bijan Robinson, I think, will be heavily involved. Give it to me all day at plus 300.
And Brandon, just to jump in, as you mentioned, I wasn't on the text chain, but I'll let that go. No, I'm just kidding. But Brandon, when you bet this, I saw you put this in the app, as you mentioned. You got a much better number. It was, I think you got it at 450. Now it's down to 300. This moved quickly on Bijan Robinson.
It did. And I think that's the key point I want to add here is normally it would be ludicrous to bet on any of these awards at a plus 300. Like a future at plus 300 in a race that's wide open like this, 25% implied. Typically, you would hear me screaming at you, don't do this. Don't bet on the favorite. Yeah. Bijan is that good. Like, put it this way. If you hear me, the no favorites guy, betting on the favorite, then you really need to bet on the favorite. I have Bijan more like 35% likely. I don't think that he should be any longer than plus 200. So I would rather that you got the ticket at plus 450 or 400, but 300 is still good value to me. Arthur Smith, to me, is the case. You mentioned him, Jill. I'm in on Atlanta. They're one of my 2 worst to first teams. I think that they could contend as high as the 2 seed in the NFC. So I'm not taking Desmond Ridder for my NFL MVP ticket too. Let's not get too crazy, but Bijan winning Rookie of the Year, I think, would make a lot of sense. One thing a lot of people have been hesitant here is, well, yeah, what about Tyler Algier? What about Cordero Patterson? Won't they take too many touches away? This team ran the ball nearly 600 times last year. And if you are ahead because you're winning games and the defense is a little better this year, guess what you do when you're ahead and you're Arthur Smith? You run the ball even more. So, like, they might run extra this year. There's plenty of touches. I agree with Kerner's numbers. I think 300 carries is very much in the mix. One other thing, here's the schedule start out. You got to get this now. Week 1, Atlanta gets to play rookie Bryce Young on the road. They get his road debut. Then Packers, Lions, Jaguars, Falcons. Sorry, not Falcons. I forget who's next. I wrote that one down wrong. But the next 4 teams are all teams I have in the bottom 12 in my defense rankings. So I would love to tell you, wait around, get someone else hot. Maybe you can buy this cheaper. I think there's just as much of a chance that this is like a negative number, and Bijan is the odds-on favorite by sometime in October. So I still like the value. I'll still grab him at plus 300. It's one of the better award bets you can make right now.
Green Bay so you mentioned Carolina, Green Bay week 2 at Detroit, Jacksonville in London, and then Houston.
Right.
Houston was the team.
That's right. That's probably why I missed out on that one, because Houston's my other worst to first pick. So, of course, I actually like them. So we'll just leave them off the list. But let's get that 4-0. I mean, really, they could win those first 4 games. Atlanta's entire schedule and division is winnable games. If this team is actually good and competent, and I think that they are, and they will be in the mix, and Bijan will be a big reason why.
Well, we hope by the end of the season in January, when we're celebrating our Bijan Robinson future winner for Offensive Rookie of the Year, it will be a great memory. And gentlemen, more memories are made when you're there for live NFL action. And when you need tickets, our friends at Ticketmaster have got you covered as the official marketplace of the National Football League. Ticketmaster gives you more ways to find your perfect seat. Their interactive seat map gives you 360-degree previews of your section to make sure you have the best view of those pivotal plays. And if your plans change, Ticketmaster gives you more flexibility to sell or transfer your tickets. Plus, mobile tickets make getting in on game day a breeze, and you can even customize your Ticketmaster app to rep your team's colors. So, for Brandon Anderson, it's the green and gold for North Dakota State. Find tickets today at Ticketmaster.com/NFL in a Trey Lance version of that. Moving on, let's go to Defensive Rookie of the Year. We're going to rifle through the rest of these awards here on the show. Give us the layout, Brandon, for Defensive Rookie of the Year and how this normally shakes out.
Similar to Offensive Rookie of the Year, you need a top pick. 20 out of 23 winners this century, first-round picks. 19 out of 23, top 15 picks. So you don't need to look too far down the draft board. In fact, 6 of our winners this century are just the top defender. That doesn't seem that many, but that's 26% of them are the top defender. You could blind bet at plus 300 on every top defender and be coming out ahead profitably for the century so far. So spoiler alert, that's where we're going here. 7 of our 11 winners here started plus 900 or shorter. So you do want the favorite here. That is often the case on defense awards. And we want a pass rusher here. 6 of our last 9 have 7 sacks or more. We do have 3 corners in that stretch as well. It used to be a linebacker award, but it's been a pass rusher award lately, as most defensive awards have been. So I'm going to just jump right into my guy here because, guys, this is my favorite pick of the podcast. This is my favorite pick of the preseason. Give me the favorite, Will Anderson. Anderson stick together, plus 500. I mentioned the Houston Texans. I am all in on the Texans team. I think this team is way overlooked right now. They've added a lot of floor raisers on both sides of the ball. They moved to D'Amico Ryans from Lovie Smith and frankly from being irrelevant the last few years. Like, how many times did we even talk about the Texans on our podcast last year? They were in our wrap-up, moving it along section like week after week. Will Anderson is going to help change that. Top 3 pick, first defender on the board, consensus top defender, really. He's been a monster in the preseason. He had a play where he came off the edge, blew up a running back, went over and through him and blew up the quarterback, and the ball just like bouncing out into the open behind everyone as Will Anderson is just like, I'm the Rookie of the Year, guys. This is the play. I remember the Jadeveon Clowney play from college when he did that? It reminded me of that here with Will Anderson. So he's been awesome. Texans defense finished 10th in DVOA the second half of last season. So they're already improving. And now you get Will Anderson. You get corner Derek Stingley back. He missed most of that. And you get D'Amico Ryans, who's been this awesome leader of the 49ers defense all these years. So I think the defense improves a lot. Anderson has had 7, 17, and 10.5 sacks the last 3 years. So he can rack up those numbers. And then here's one other stat I love. The last 6 defensive rookie of the year joined a team that was bottom 6 in points per game allowed and then leapt to top 10 after that. The Jets went from dead last to 4th last year. Sauce Gardner, Rookie of the Year. Who's our 6 bottom points per game guys this year? The Bears, Cardinals, Vikings, Lions, Colts, and the Houston Texans. I have the Houston Texans going worst to first in the division, plus 1,100. I am in on the Texans. I'm in on D'Amico Ryans, and I'm especially in on Will Anderson. Plus 500. It's my favorite pick of the entire podcast.
And if I remember correctly, Brandon, please interject if I don't get this right. D'Amico Ryans coached Nick Bosa in 2019. on the Niners. So
Absolutely. And Nick Bosa last year, who won Defensive Player of the Year as well.
Yep.
So yeah, getting D'Amico here to unleash Will Anderson. I think, look, Alabama obviously wins a lot of games in college football. Will Anderson was not being used necessarily optimally in the way that he will be used in Houston, just unleashing him as a pass rusher too. So I think he's a guy that actually could be better in the pros than he even was used, surrounded by juggernaut talent in Alabama.
Okay, very good. I think, Jill, you're good on this one, right? We're going to move on to Coach of the Year.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one point. Like, I'm not going to make a pick on this. I still think it's a little volatile. I did want to mention that Jalen Carter's odds have completely shifted over the preseason with a lot of the training camp hype and being on that Eagles team. A lot of people are looking at more opportunities for him. He's already now down to plus 550 at FanDuel. I just wanted to make one tip because sometimes people will look at this odds list and want to make a pick way down the list. And I would just dissuade you to do that. Don't pick anybody that's not a first round pick, because since 2000, only 3 players to win Defensive Rookie of the Year were not a first round pick. And the last one was Shaq Leonard in 2018. But again, it does not happen very often. And speaking of D'Amico Ryans, he was actually one of those picks in 2006. But yeah, if you're going to be looking, just look in the first round, but otherwise stick to the favorites.
I mean,
Shaq Leonard makes it onto the awards podcast 2 straight years. Our guy, Shaq Leonard, he's back.
Based on Brandon's wisdom about this pick, it almost feels like Will Anderson's odds should be similar to Bijan's odds in Brandon's eyes as it pertains to defensive rookie, offensive rookie comparisons.
And that's what I would say is to Jalen Carter. I think he's the key here as to why Will Anderson's odds are not that way. I think they should be. Jalen Carter plays defensive tackle. He is not going to get the same edge rush stats opportunities as Will Anderson. Look, I know he's effectively stepping into Javon Hargrave's role, who had double-digit sacks, but he's not even a starter necessarily. They still have Fletcher Cox. They have Jordan Davis, last year's starter. He's going to play because they rotate through guys, but the Eagles have like 10 guys on that defensive front that they're going to be rotating through. I don't see where he gets the stats. And look, stats matter. If you're a defensive tackle, you usually finish the year with like 25 tackles and 5 sacks or something. You got to catch people's attention and capture imagination. Will Anderson's going to just have a lot more chance to get those flash plays, I think, than Jalen Carter. So thank you, Jalen Carter, for existing. I think you're buying us value on this bet here.
All right, let's move on to Coach of the Year. And yeah, we're going to give coaches some love, because typically when the three of us are together, at least we crap on the coaching, which you can tune into another podcast for that. These guys will be involved with that one as it pertains to first coach fired. But we're actually going to give the coaches some love. And we teased this earlier because some of the criteria Brandon's going to lay out, I think, lines up for Kyle Shanahan, but turns out he's a guy we're not even really going to talk about as it pertains to this award for Brandon's reasons. So why don't you give him to us?
Yeah, so I think Kyle Shanahan, it's interesting you mentioned him. I think he does line up with some of the points here, but doesn't with the others. And so there's 3 things you got to do to win Coach of the Year. It's very easy. Number 1, you got to win games. 12.1 wins the last 10 years, and that's mostly on a 16-game schedule. So really, you're probably going to win 13 games here. 9 out of the 10 won at least 11 games. So that's the minimum. You got to win 11 or more games. Number 2, you got to improve. The average here is going from 6.7 wins to just over 12 wins. So a 5.2 win improvement, 8 out of the 10 by at least 4 wins from last year. Going to be hard for Shanahan to improve by that much. If your expectations are too high, that's a problem, which goes to point number 3. You have to surprise. All 10 coaches here coach for a team that went over the win total by at least 2 wins from where it started at the beginning of the year. Average 4.4 wins above the win total. So this is the narrative portion. This is the, hey, wow, look at this team. The New York Giants. We thought they sucked, and now they're a playoff team. Brian Daboll, Coach of the Year. That's the formula. They won the games, they improved a lot, and they surprised. 4 out of 6 winners on this one have been a first-year coach, so that's a trend to watch lately. And 5 out of the last 7 have been offensive-minded. Makes sense. That's where the league is heading. Daboll fit both of those last year as well.
Okay, so with all that being said, so that makes sense. And 2 of those notes are worthy of why Shanahan would not be a good choice. But I mean, the way the new coach comes into a system for a first-year coach, it's Shanahan is obviously not a first-year coach with San Francisco, but he always seems to have a first-year quarterback because he just can't seem to get consistency at that position. First-year quarterback for him is what I mean. So, Jill, you got a pick for this one. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm going to be sprinkling on this because it's plus 2,500. And I know Brandon is a little more higher on the Falcons than the Panthers, but I can't overlook Frank Reich right now because, again, the low expectations. They went 7-10 last year. Definitely could see a 4-win improvement. I know, again, I just don't think as much as separating the Falcons and the Panthers as maybe we're indicating. And looking at Frank Reich's historical profile, the 5 quarterbacks that he has gotten to use, he might have had the worst luck. Again, he had some say in picking those quarterbacks, but probably like the 5 quarterbacks now that he has coached or he has had as a coach: Andrew Luck, retired; Jacoby Brissett, backup on another team; Phillip Rivers, retired; Carson Wentz, out of football; Matt Ryan, retired. Again, it's just been a whirlwind of horrible quarterback play. And now you're getting a rookie quarterback who, looked pretty composed in his final 2 years at Alabama, and talking about how, they're going to probably win some games this year that they shouldn't. They've got the Falcons and the Saints to open the season too, so they might be able to get a little bit of a head start in that division if they play well in those games. Again, they're not favored in those games, but it's worth mentioning. The other thing too that I wanted to bring up is when teams have the number 1 overall pick, they tend to do better ATS the following season, so against the spread. So I've been tracking this. I have the data since 1985. Teams with the first overall pick see an ATS winning percentage increase of 12.4% every year. That's the average. And they went 9-8 ATS last year. And based on this trend, they're probably going to improve to 10-7 ATS, maybe 11-6 ATS. So they're going to be competitive and they're going to be in these games. So if Frank Reich, again, a lot of pressure on him too, because this team, there's going to be higher expectations just with having the number 1 overall pick. At 25-1, I think he fits a great profile to see a little bit of improvement, especially with how they were playing near the end of the year. Like, they probably should have beat the Bucs in week 17 to win that division, but obviously they collapsed in the second half. So Frank Reich is who I'm sprinkling on at 25-1.
Well, you forgot that he also coached Sam Ehlinger last year, and that's how he got his ass fired at the end right there. That was the game in New England. That's how I remember. They played the Patriots, and the next day he got let go.
He's Ellinger to me. Ellinger. I don't know.
So, and you know something too? Remember, Jeff Saturday was their coach that replaced him. Like, it almost kind of embarrassed Frank Reich in a sense, where it's like, you think this guy, Jeff Saturday, is going to be a better coach than him? So if he can rebound from that, there's a narrative there too. Like, where if the Panthers do get off to a good start, or they're in the mix for the division, wild card, whatever it may be, it's like the Colts got rid of this guy for Jeff Saturday. So
we almost need comeback coach of the year now at this point.
That's good. So most of these coaches who get fired, they're just buried in their coordinators for the rest of their lives. Brandon, so piggybacking off what Jill said about he makes the case for the Panthers coach. You've brought up Arthur Smith a few times in the Bijan segment for Offensive Rookie of the Year. And Arthur Smith, offensive play caller, and might have a quarterback that won't, as we found out watching the Netflix documentary Quarterback, he might not have a QB that might just walk out and not come back and play quarterback again or be with the team.
Yeah, not a great look for Marcus Mariota. Between that and the preseason, frankly, if you've watched any Eagles games, Eagles fans are not excited about Mariota as the potential backup there. So he's gone now. Desmond Ridder, hopefully better. I like Arthur Smith. I'm going to give you 3 picks here. I'm going to build a position. You can only have 32 winners here. And by the criteria we can rule out the teams at the top, and we can rule out the teams at the bottom who probably aren't good enough, like, Jonathan Gannon and the Cardinals. So really, we're down to probably 10 or 15 options here. I like Frank Reich. I ranked these guys, and he was, I believe, my 5th or 6th choice. I'm going to take my top 3 here. So give me Arthur Smith, Atlanta, plus 1,400. Give me D'Amico Ryans, Houston, plus 2,500. He's my favorite if I only played one. And then Matt LaFleur, plus 1,600, Green Bay. So I'm going to play all 3 of those together. It's basically a plus 510. So I get a 5-1 on my top 3 guys out of this mix. So I kind of made the case really already for both Atlanta and Houston. So I'm not going to go too far in on that. Atlanta, I like them. They're my division favorite there. Weak division. I don't love the Saints. I think the Falcons are as good as anyone. I don't love the Jaguars this year. I know I don't mind the Trevor Lawrence MVP bet we talked about earlier, because if things are right, I think that's in play. I think they could be the 1 or the 2 seed, and he would be the reason why and be in the mix. He's really the only thing I like about that team. My roster matrix, the way I kind of grade out these teams, he's the one position, quarterback, that is above average on the entire team, not the entire rest of the offense or the defense. I think they're a little overrated, and that makes that division very winnable, which is why I love Houston. Houston, I have as the outright favorite in that division. That's right. The Texans are my favorite over the Jaguars, so I have to take D'Amico 25-1. And then, really, I'm just trying to grab a sleeper from 3 bad divisions, and I think the NFC North is the actual worst division in football. I don't love the Lions. I don't like Justin Fields and the Bears. I don't feel great about my Vikings. So I'm going to take a flyer on Matt LaFleur and the Packers. I don't even really like the Packers that much. Obviously, I don't like them as a fan, but I don't love the team. The talent is there, though. Jordan Love has looked really good in the preseason. Got to give him a shot. He's been, a few years now to get ready. The defense has a lot of talent that hasn't come together, and it's part of why I don't like them, but there's talent here. I think there's probably the most talented team in the division. So I'll take LaFleur and basically give me 3 shots at this award from bad divisions, easy schedules, and a chance to just rack up a bunch of wins if things go right. It's the NFL league. It's the not for long. We don't really know how things go. So this is a good chance to kind of bet on volatility and bet on some of these teams that might be on the upswing here.
All right, let's move on. We have 3 more to go. Let's work in comeback player of the year. This one's always fascinating because, I don't know, I feel like it's really open-ended for some guys that were hurt, sort of. Like you mentioned, Brock Purdy, who was banged up last year. If you miss X amount of games, how does that fare? And then we've got the obvious one from last year, Damar Hamlin, which I know, Brandon, you're going to discuss in your layout. Try to make sense for the people as to how this normally shakes out.
Yeah, not a lot of historical profile here, obviously. This is a fully narrative award. Who captured our imaginations and came back? The only stats I have for you here, 11 out of 15 have been quarterbacks. Duh, we like quarterbacks, right? We pay attention to them. So quarterbacks are going to win. 11 out of the 15, what did you come back from? They came back from an injury or health scare of some sort. So like last year, Geno Smith, what did he come back from? Sucking, I guess, like his career.
Bad too. Bad or had a down year. Yeah, right.
Right. So if you are not an injury or health scare guy, you probably need to just come back from your career resurrecting and be a quarterback to do that, win a lot of games. So keep that in mind. One thing is you do have to win. 14 out of our 15 guys made the playoffs. 14 out of 15 won 9 or more games. So you're not inspirational to us if you're 4-13. You got to actually matter here. So Damar Hamlin is interesting here because depending on your book, I've seen him as short, long, I don't know. Minus 275 is the best number I can see out there. He's minus 350 some places. I've seen him as long as short, I don't know. I've seen him at minus 700. They're asking us to bet $700 right now in August to give them our money until February to return $100 in profit on Damar Hamlin. I have more to say about Hamlin, but Jill, this seems ludicrous to me. Are you considering Hamlin here? Look, I know the narrative is obvious. The dude, it's amazing he's even in the league and stepping foot on the field again. Is that enough? And he's the winner and this is over. Are you betting it? Where are you at on Damar Hamlin?
I think I'm aligned with you, and reading your profile on Action Network about comeback player of the year, one of the points that you brought up was the fact that he's not really a traditional starter either, especially for the safeties for the Bills when you've got Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. For me, I think obviously it's a great story, and there's a very good chance he will win, but I can't recommend anybody betting something minus odds like that in August when the narrative and story can completely change. Like Matthew Stafford, for example, coming off an injury, he's around 50-1 for this award, but I'm not as high on the Rams this year, and I really don't trust him to stay healthy for 17 games. He just takes too many hits. Plus, he's already won this award before in his career. There's only been one 2-time winner of this award, Chad Pennington. He won in 2011. So with Hamlin, I think that's my issue is that at least the last time we were kind of thinking about this, maybe I think of the Alex Smith year where he only played probably 6 or 7 games, but it was such a heartfelt story. And the fact that he was a quarterback and the fact that Washington won and that he was an instrumental part of them winning, I think helped push that over the edge. I'm not sure if just showing up on the football field is enough to consider warranting as being this high of a favorite in August.
Brandon, if you're a fan of the Texans, John Mechie's got to catch your attention, right? Because that is a wide receiver room. I know Robert Woods, I think his best years are behind him, but if Mechie, leukemia, ACL to miss his entire rookie year, if he becomes the favorite target of CJ Stroud, and you're a fan of the Texans and what they're putting together, that to me is also something to consider. And he's a skill guy too, so he'll be on the field more, just more involved than a Damar Hamlin.
Yeah, I mean, to me, strictly from an award candidate purview, he's kind of Damar Hamlin light in this scenario. Like, I don't know if John Mechie is in the conversation, right? Everybody knows Damar Hamlin because we all watched it and we all saw it unfold and we were all hoping for the best all the way along. Yeah. I don't know if the public is invested yet in John Mechie. And unless maybe that changes, maybe he has this great 1,000-yard season and the Texans are as good as I think, and maybe he explodes onto the scene then. Great. I think that he then is in the conversation. But otherwise, if we're going to give the award to the, oh my gosh, how is he even on the field right now candidate, it's Damar Hamlin. Like that's the case. So, but yeah, you brought up Alex Smith, Joe. He went 5-1 down the stretch. They made the playoffs with him at quarterback. That mattered. Eric Berry came back from cancer on defense. He's the one defender in recent years. So that's the guy you're kind of looking here, that he came back and played again. But Eric Berry played at an all-pro level for the Chiefs that won like 11 or 12 games, made the playoffs. The Bills are going to make the playoffs and win those games, but we got Teddy Bruschi came back and is like a core player of your Patriots. Like, he's the heart of the defense, came back from a stroke later that year. Again, miracle to be on the field, but also you were a really good, important part of the team. And I'm sorry, that's not what Damar Hamlin's role has been on this team so far. I hope that it changes, but I can't bet on it. For me, my best bet on this award, if I can word it this way, is don't bet on Damar Hamlin. I'm sorry, like that from a betting perspective only, that cannot be the right investment at a minus 300, 500, 700. It's just not a wise investment of your money from August to February to win such a small amount for a thing that is way more open than we would like it to believe from the odds on this award right now.
And Jill, you've got a best bet for this award?
Best bet, but with a recommendation as only a sprinkle, because this is at 75-1 right now at FanDuel. And again, I wouldn't put more than maybe like a little sprinkle, like a 0.1 of a unit on it. But I'm looking at Saints wide receiver Michael Thomas, and we know his pedigree. We know his history, what he can do in the NFL and the stats he can put up. He just hasn't been healthy. He hasn't really played much at all over since 2019 when he won Offensive Player of the Year. Now, he did play 3 games last year. He caught 3 touchdowns in 3 games. And the encouraging thing, I think, as well, with the winning profile, the Saints have the easiest schedule in the NFL from a strength of schedule standpoint. They have a nice high win total. They're favored to win their division, so we could easily see double-digit wins and potentially and a playoff berth. And Derek Carr is going to be a step up from Andy Dalton. I'm sorry, I'm not saying Derek Carr is this world-changing quarterback, but Andy Dalton is still Andy Dalton, and Derek Carr will be better on that front. And we see how he treats his wide receiver ones in this history as a Raider. And all you have to do is look at last year with Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams finished with the most receiving touchdowns in the NFL, second most overall targets. I think if we see Michael Thomas play at least 15 games, we've got a great shot here at plus 7,500.
Okay. Derek Carr, number 12 on Brandon Anderson's quarterback rankings. So he's got him up there. We got 2 more to go. We got Offensive Player of the Year and Defensive Player of the Year. Let's try to get through these as quick as possible. Brandon, why don't you give us the layout on Offensive Player of the Year?
Offensive Player of the Year, you're looking for basically your number 1 fantasy player. That's what this award is for. Who had the crazy outlier stats that no one saw coming? Here's what we're looking at. Running back, 350 carries, 1,800 yards, 14 touchdowns over the last 10 years. That's the average we need here. So monster season. If you need a receiver, 140 catches, 1,800 yards, 11 scores. That's the sort of receiving season you're looking at. Quarterbacks, 4,600 yards, 44 touchdowns. So you just need monster stats. Here's what I think is interesting about this award. Running backs won all 8 Offensive Player of the Year from 1996 to 2003. Then we shifted to quarterbacks. From 07 to 16, 7 out of 10 quarterbacks. Now, 3 of the last 4 were receivers. So I think it's the receivers era. I only really looked at receivers on this award. And I think that maybe buys us a little potential here if I'm right that this is a receivers era, because there's a lot of quarterbacks and running backs that are getting numbers on here as well. So last thing, you do have to win. You're going to probably win if you put up numbers like that anyway. But our last 10 Offensive Player of the Years all won at least 10 games and averaged 12 wins.
Okay, and Jill, you got this right last year with Justin Jefferson. You gave it out on this very podcast. So who might be the Joe Gallant winner this year in 2023?
Well, Brandon, I'm sorry. I have to look at running back, but it's the only running back I will look at for this because of how versatile he is, and that's Christian McCaffrey. And he's sitting right now at 14-1 just because he is that do-it-all stud. And you saw as soon as he got to the 49ers, it was like a cheat code. Like from week 7 to week 18, he scored in 8 of 11 games. He scored in all 3 playoff games. Now, they lost the first game that he was on the roster because he showed up like Thursday to play the Kansas City Chiefs. Sorry. And then didn't lose again until the NFC Championship game. Last year, finished with 256 carries, 85 catches. That's the most since 2019. And I know the injury risk is real with Christian McCaffrey, but the reason why I'm willing to overcome that objection is because we've seen him do this. We've seen him have the 1,000-yard rushing, the 1,000-yard receiving, the 100 catches, and the fact that he's got complementary pieces like a Deebo Samuel and an Eli Mitchell to spell him so he doesn't have to do 25 carries a game. And you've got Kyle Juszczyk as a top 3 fullback, Trent Williams, the best left tackle in football. So I think we could see 1,000 yards rushing, 100 catches, 15 combined touchdowns. And if he's putting up those numbers and we see San Francisco at the top of the NFC, he's going to be in the mix all the way to the end of the season. And then all you got to do is just listen to Brandon during the season for potentially hedging opportunities and then maximize your profit.
There you go. There you go. I mean, hey, Garrett Wilson last year for Offensive Rookie of the Year. That was something that we talked about mid-season. Yeah. Maybe he jumps. Is he a target possibly? Because Aaron Rodgers loves himself some Garrett Wilson.
He does. I honestly looked at him. I was ready to just like dump all over him as short odds, but man, they don't have any other receivers. And Garrett Wilson is a guy that could make the leap in year 2. I'm going to go with a different guy making the leap in year 2. I'm going to give you 2 names here, but my favorite pick here is 65-1, a different sophomore. Give me Chris Olave on the Saints. It's basically the case you just made, Jill, except I don't think Michael Thomas stays healthy. And if he doesn't, then Chris Olave is in line to get a lot of work. Derek Carr loves his top target. Chris Olave was really good last year, specifically running the seam route. That's the Darren Waller play. That's the thing that Derek Carr has been throwing for years. And yards per route run, here's the top 9 in the league last year. Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, Waddle, A.J. Brown, Chris Olave, number 5, Devonta Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb. That's a who's who of the best receivers in the NFL. Those are all top 2 fantasy round picks, and then it's Chris Olave. So he had 119 targets last year. I think with Carr, they're going to pass more this year. He's going to get more targets. I'd say 30 or 40 more targets. I think he's in the mix here and could break out and have that Justin Jefferson sort of season. So I was really surprised to see him so long at 65-1. My outright pick here, and really these are just sprinkles because we're betting on unknown outliers. You got to play this more, like Jill said, as the season went on. But I'll take Tyreek Hill 20-1 as well. He's who I would just pick straight up against the field. Guys don't repeat win here. So Justin Jefferson probably out. Cooper Kupp probably out. We haven't had a repeat winner since Marshall Faulk in 2001, I believe, other than quarterbacks. Here's the numbers for Tyreek last year. He had 10 games with 7 or more catches. He had 700-yard games. He had 4 out of the 16 games in the entire league with 160 yards or more. He had a quarter of them. So I mentioned yards per route run just a second ago with Olave. Tyreek Hill is number 1 with a bullet. And I mean with a bullet, the way this dude runs. He was almost 3 yards per route run. Second place was Justin Jefferson under 2.5. Like he is lapping the field that good. Through half the season last year, he was on a 2,000-yard pace. Honestly, I think he would have won if Tua didn't get hurt down the stretch. So I think he's the candidate. If I have to pick somebody right here, so I'll sprinkle Tyreek 20-1 and then Chris Olave 65-1.
Yeah, and even those receivers you mentioned, Michael Thomas had Drew Brees at quarterback, Kupp, Stafford, Super Bowl year, Justin Jefferson. The Vikings won a ton of 1-score games last year, but they won their division. They were a really good team. So I know you didn't lay this out in your outlook, but being on a good team the Saints with Olave favored to win the division. I know you guys like the Falcons a little bit to make some noise potentially, but that aligns too in a bad conference.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting with that? I noticed this as well about we only have these 3 receivers, so it's maybe overreading into it. Yeah. But you mentioned obviously Jefferson had Kirk Cousins, and Thomas had Drew Brees and Teddy Bridgewater, I think, for 5 games that season.
Right, that's right.
Cooper Kupp had Stafford. These are good quarterbacks, but you mentioned my QB rankings. These are quarterbacks that late career Brees, these are like 10th to 15th best quarterbacks. These are not Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow. So be careful, because if you put up huge numbers like Jamar Chase maybe, but Joe Burrow is also on your team, maybe he just gets credit and wins MVP instead. I do think it's interesting that you need maybe not a stud quarterback, just a pretty good one, good enough to give you the ball, but bad enough so that you're the star and not the quarterback.
Right, that's a good point. It's almost like how we talk about, does the quarterback have the weapons? Well, if that's typically how you have to start your support for the quarterback, it means it's more about the weapons than the quarterback. You follow me? So that's a good point. That's something that lines up for Olave, I think, for sure, and Tyreek Hill with Tua, and Christian McCaffrey with Brock Purdy. So that's good stuff.
Hey, that's future MVP Brock Purdy to you, sir.
Okay. All right. Let's wrap up. Defensive Player of the Year. Who normally wins this award, Brandon, and who might you like?
We want a pass rusher. 8 of our last 10 have been pass rushers, 1 corner, 1 off-ball linebacker. So those pass rushers have averaged almost 17 sacks over the last 10 years, at least 11 for all of them. So you want a pass rusher, again, flash stats. It's the easy way to go. Average age here is 26. 7 of our 10 are in the age range from 25 to 27. So we kind of want someone in their prime, not someone going too far past that. No one since Charles Woodson in their 30s, 2009 for him. And then we don't necessarily need you to be on the best defense. Average finish here defensively for these guys last decade, only about the 10th best points per game allowed and 9th defensive DVOA. You don't necessarily have to be on the number 1 defense. You have to be on a good defense because that will matter. So I like this award just because, again, defensive awards are more predictable than you think. The field here is not as wide as we like it to believe. So I'm going to go back to what I did last year. It did not work out for me on this podcast. I built a 2-man position and both of my guys got hurt. So I'm going to build a position again. I'm going to do a crazy position here. I like all 3 favorites, and I'm taking all 3 favorites because I think their odds are all too long. I think the odds for these guys at 20, 30, 40 to 1 should be like 100 to 1. It's going to be one of our top 7, 8 guys on the list. We just picked the top defender. Like, I don't know who's good at defense. This guy has 20 sacks. He must be the defensive player of the year. I'm sorry, but that's kind of what I think the voters are doing here. So Micah Parsons, he would be my top pick. He's got the best odds, plus 550. Myles Garrett for Cleveland, plus 800. TJ Watt, Pittsburgh, I had him last year. Had interception and a sack the first game, and then he got hurt. Sorry for me. He's plus 850. I'm going to take all 3. I think it sounds crazy to take all 3 favorites, but I get all 3 together for plus 170 here. I think I'm going to have a very good chance, better than 50-50 to win the award. So I don't know which one. I like all 3. I truly couldn't pick them. So I'm just going to take all 3.
Okay, and Jill, one of those 3 you are a fan of, and who might that be?
Yeah, I'll help you pick a favorite of the 3. TJ Watt at plus 800, mainly because a lot of the profile you just explained. Now, the one part of that profile is being a little bit younger. He's going to turn 29 in October, so I guess this is going to be his last hurrah. But from an edge rusher standpoint, prior to this 2022, there was nobody better from that department. He led the league in total sacks from 2019 to 2021, 50 sacks in 46 games. Now, he only finished with 5.5 last year, but again, dealing with that injury, missed 7 games, but it was night and day for the Steelers when he was on the field. In 10 games he played, Pittsburgh is 8-2, held opponents to an average of 14.3 points per game. In the 7 games he missed, they were 1-6. They gave up 25.2 points per game. So again, it's a pretty obvious night and day comparison here. And one of the reasons why I'm interested to see how his odds are going to fluctuate is because he's got a pretty good test in week 1 against the San Francisco 49ers. And I'm interested to see where they line him up, because if they put him outside of Trent Williams, he's probably not going to get as much done. But if he's on the right side of that O-line, which is much weaker, he is going to wreak havoc. And if they also get the Browns, the Texans, and the Raiders to finish the opening month. there's a very legitimate chance he could have 6.5 to 8 sacks in the opening month of the season. So if he's already at that point, we're going to see those odds shift even better in our favor. So I love TJ Watt to win another Defensive Player of the Year award at plus 800.
I'm glad you brought up the record with and without. That is stunning. Not really stunning when you think about how impactful he is, but it's drastic. It's a huge drop-off when he doesn't play. Okay, so with all that, after that full breakdown, excellent stuff, guys. What jumps out, and you may have, based on your tone and your excitement, I could sense what was your best bet in that whole episode, but best bet from each of you, and then we'll get out of here from that whole show. Brandon.
I'll go first.
All right, go for it, Brandon.
I'm going to go first because Anderson stick together. It's Will Anderson, plus 500 Defensive Rookie of the Year. I said it when we were there. It's my favorite bet of the podcast. I'm going to be on more of these podcasts. It's going to be my favorite bet of all those podcasts, too. Stop listening. Go bet. Well, listen to Jill's pick. Then turn off your podcast and go bet on Will Anderson, 5-1 Defensive Rookie of the Year.
I keep thinking you're speaking in like third person every time you bring up Anderson. So, TJ Watt, Defensive Player of the Year at plus 800, and Bijan for Offensive Rookie of the Year at plus 300. Those two are my best bets for the 2023 season.
Excellent. And check out both of these guys, Brandon Anderson, Brandon Anderson and Joe Gallant in the Action app when they add, and they've already added some of these in the app a while back and some that are coming in now over in the Action app, these futures picks, these award picks. So be sure to do so. That is our NFL Awards Best Bets episode for Joe Gallant, Brandon Anderson, Brendan Glasheen. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're all enjoying our NFL pods that are coming out here on the Action Network podcast, all leading up to NFL Week 1. Thanks for tuning into the Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel. We'll talk to you again next time.